So have you ever thought about how people, well, how they figured out what plants did way back before modern science? What if nature itself, left clues, visible hints on plants, minerals, maybe even animals pointing to their purpose? Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that. The doctrine of signatures, specifically how it just exploded during the Renaissance. It went from these sort of vague ancient ideas to a really formalized system.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And for this deep dive, we've been looking at excerpts from a chapter called The Renaissance Explosion, Formalization and Popularization.
Mm.
Really lays out this key period for the doctrine.
Right. And our goal here is to unpack how this idea that God or nature leaves these visible signatures, how it got such theological heft, but also became super practical, part of everyday medicine?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Empowering people to actually, well, read nature for themselves, for
Yes.
health, for insight. It's kind of an unexpected early step towards democratizing knowledge, really.
It really is. So the doctrine of signatures wasn't totally new, but it feels like it was just waiting for the right conditions. And the Renaissance, our sources call it a fiery crucible, an age of audacity, challenging all ideas. What was it about that time that let this doctrine really take off?
Well, that fiery crucible is a good way to put it. The whole intellectual climate was just ripe for it.
Hmm.
You had this resurgence of Hermetic philosophy, that mystical tradition, looking for hidden wisdom in nature, and also Neoplatonism.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the idea that the divine sort of filters down into the material world, that God's presence is in everything. These ideas really nurtured the doctrine of signatures, gave it a framework to become more formal, more widespread than it had been.
And speaking of formalizing it, especially the theological side, you get this amazing character, Jakob Böhme, a German shoemaker from Görlitz. Just a craftsman, but his mind apparently soared higher than any mountain peak. What was his specific contribution? He sounds fascinating.
He really was. His ideas weren't academic theories, not really. They came from these intense spiritual experiences, what the text calls a mystic's vision. He was on this deep quest to understand God, creation, divine purpose, and his big work, De Signatura Rerum, the signature of all things from 1621. That's key. But it's crucial to remember, like you said, it wasn't a medical book, not at all. It was this grand spiritual cosmology.
So, a spiritual cosmology, how did that translate into understanding these signatures on plants and things? Was he just seeing God everywhere?
Pretty much, yeah, but in a very specific way. For Boehm, God wasn't distant. The divine permeated everything. Every plant, every rock wasn't just made by God. It was a direct manifestation of God's inner workings, a revelation made visible.
Wow.
So the signatures, the shape of a leaf, the color of a flower, they weren't just random marks. He saw them as uh, visible expressions of a deeper inherent spiritual quality, a divine will embedded right there by the Creator.
So, like God's handwriting on the world.
Exactly. He called it God's own language, a system you could actually read to understand the world, to gain gnosis or spiritual knowledge. Reading a signature was like reading the divine blueprint. And that theological depth, that was Böhme's huge contribution. It gave the doctrine this immensely powerful justification, lifting it way beyond just, folk observations about plants that look like body parts.
Right.
It became a sacred act of discernment. And interestingly, it also shifted authority away from just ancient texts towards observing nature directly.
Yeah.
Kind of an unexpected nudge towards empirical thinking, even though the premise was purely spiritual.
Okay, so Boone provides the deep spiritual why. But then you have Paracelsus, who seems like he was all about the how. How do we use these signs in medicine? He sounds like a completely different character, volatile, radical.
Oh, definitely. Theophrastus von Hohenheim Paracelsus, a Swiss physician, alchemist,
Yeah.
a real firebrand. He famously spick scorn, as the text says, at the established medical thinking of the time, Gallianism.
So he wasn't playing by the old rules.
Not at all. He was all about direct observation, experimenting, learning from nature itself, not just dusty ancient books. His whole approach was this fiery blend, mysticism, alchemy, practical experience. It definitely vibed with the doctrine of signatures, but his take was, well, more complex, more nuanced maybe.
And he had different ideas about illness, too, right? Not the four humors thing, but more localized. Something about an arceus and arcana.
Exactly. He saw illness as a local problem, caused by external stuff messing with the body's harmony. And yeah, he talked about the arceus, like this vital life force and things, and the arcana, the hidden powers or virtues within a substance.
So how did he find these hidden powers, these arcana? Did signatures play a role there?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
That was frequently the starting point. He might observe a plant's properties, its signature, and that would guide his search for its hidden power, its arcanum. The text gives the example of hypericum, St. John's wort.
Oh.
It gives off this red oil when you crush the flowers. Paracelsus apparently used its red tincture for blood disorders. That seems like a pretty clear signature guiding the use, right?
Makes sense. Red oil, blood issues.
Right. So while his methods for extracting the essence, using alchemy and chemistry, were revolutionary for the time, the initial hunt for that essence, it was frequently guided by the initial signatures he perceived. His core belief that everything outwardly signified its inward nature lined up perfectly with the doctrine, even if he applied it in his own unique, sometimes pretty intense way.
Okay, so we have the mystic philosopher Buma, the radical physician Paracelsus. But for this idea to really spread, to get into regular households, that took something else. And that's where the great herbalists come in.
Absolutely. They were the popularizers, the chroniclers of the plant kingdom, writing these amazing, huge books, often with incredible illustrations. That's how the doctrine really hit the mainstream.
Who are some of the big names there?
Well, you've got John Gerard in England. His Herbal from 1597 was hugely popular. He wasn't shy about including folk beliefs tied to signatures. He'd explicitly say, this plant's shape served for this particular ailment because of how it looked. Very practical, very accessible. Then there's Nicholas Culpeper. His English physician from 1652 was massive, especially among ordinary people. He was pretty radical too, an herbalist and an astrologer.
Mixing in astrology.
Yep. He believed God meant for remedies to be easy to find and understand, and signatures were like his plain instructions. He'd link plants to plants based on how they looked or traditional lore and explain uses based on both signatures and astrology. And crucially, his books were cheap.
That's key.
Totally. Made the doctrine of signatures the bedrock of household remedies. For many, he was almost like the original, health influencer, making these ideas go viral back then.
I can just picture people getting his book and running out to their garden.
Pretty much. And there were others too. More, let's say, scientifically minded for the era. Leonhard Fuchs in Germany. His 1543 Herbal focused on really accurate identification and detailed drawings.
But even the accurate drawings helped.
You could argue they did. By showing the plant's features so clearly, those detailed illustrations, whether he intended it or not, allowed people to look for and interpret signatures. And Rembert Dodoens, a Flemish botanist, his work was also influential. He aimed for classification, but even his books included traditional uses that clearly aligned with signature thinking. It shows just how pervasive the idea was, even in more academic circles. But, we absolutely cannot talk about this explosion without mentioning the printing press.
Right, the technology itself.
Exactly. Before Gutenberg, everything was copied by hand. Slow, expensive.
Yeah.
Knowledge was locked up with scholars and monks, basically.
So the press just blew that wide open. Suddenly you could mass produce these huge herbals with all the pictures. But did that information really reach, regular folks? Could they use it?
It really did lead to an exponential increase in accessibility. Think about it. Local doctors, apothecaries, even just families in their homes could suddenly get their hands on comprehensive plant guides, including all the signature stuff.
Okay, so it wasn't just for the elites anymore.
Not at all.
Right.
Of course, people still probably ask the local healer or midwife for advice, but the knowledge itself, the books were out there. It gave people a sense of empowerment, a way to engage with this information directly, a total game changer for spreading health knowledge.
And that leads right into the social impact, doesn't it? This wasn't just an intellectual trend. It deeply shaped how people lived and treated illness in the 16th and 17th centuries.
Oh, massively. For a lot of people, the doctrine of signatures was the main way, maybe the only way. They understood how plant medicines worked. It really did empower them, like we said, to read nature in their own backyards, their own fields, looking for cures.
You can imagine midwives, village healers, parents relying on these ideas every day.
That's exactly right. The whole public understanding of health became tied up with this very intuitive system, this idea that God left clues for us. It just resonated deeply in that period, which was both intellectually curious and deeply religious. It made medicine feel accessible, like a gift directly from God's own hand. It's a really fascinating early chapter in making health knowledge more democratic.
What a journey, really. You start with Buma's deep spirituality, giving it this profound justification. Then Paracelsus brings his radical, practical, alchemical twist. And finally, the herbalists meticulously documenting everything, boosted by the printing press, taking it right into people's homes. The doctrine of signatures truly did explode in the Renaissance.
It really shows how ideas can catch fire, doesn't it? And how sometimes these seemingly esoteric concepts can end up empowering ordinary people in very real ways. It's quite a thought. A simple weed, just by how it looks, could tell you its secrets if you knew the language, like a whisper from the earth itself.
A secret whispered by the earth. I like that. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other whispers, what other patterns or signatures might nature be offering us today? What secrets are just waiting there if we only took the time to really look, to observe, and maybe try to interpret? What else is waiting to be read in the world around us?